Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 Prakim Rambam. We are starting Hilchos Avadim, and we will be learning Prakim Aleph, Beis, and Gimel. Let's begin with the header. The Rambam says, Hilchos Avadim, write the laws of servants. Yesh b'chlalan shloish esrei mitzvahs. You have in it included 13 mitzvahs. Chamesh mitzvahs asay. Shmoyne mitzvahs lois asay. V'zehu pratim. Number 1, din kinyan eved ivri. Number 2, shlo yimacher mimkeres of it, that you were not allowed to sell such an evidivity in this manner that servants, that slaves are usually sold, as we'll see. Number 3, shaloya avidenu beferach, don't make him perform excruciating labor, as will be defined. Number 4, shaloy naniach ger toishav lidois by beferach, a special law for us not to allow the ger toishav to do that with him. Number 5, shaloy navad by avodas eved, don't make him perform tasks of an eved, as we'll explain soon. Number 6, when he is going to be given his freedom, there is a mitzvah to give him a severance gift. Number 7, not to allow him to leave empty-handed. Number 8, the mitzvah of redeeming a female, a ama ivriya, a Jewish female slave or servant. Number 9, liya'ada, that's a mitzvah to designate her as a wife. Number 10, shaloi simacha, that she may not be sold. Number 11, la'avay be'evet knani lo'olam. Ela imkein hipolo yadoinav echad merash yavadov. Unlike the evet divri, max will be until yovel by an evet kanani. You're never allowed to emancipate him, only if a person knocked out any of his primary limbs. Number 12, shaloi lahaskid evet shabarach mechutz la'aretz. L'Eretz Yisrael, not to return a slave that ran away from its master, from his master that lives in Chutz La'aretz. They ran to Eretz Yisrael, not allowed to return him. Number 13, not to oppress such an Eved that ran away to Eretz Yisrael. Will be the Prakim Elu, beginning with Perek Rishon. Perek Rishon is all going to be about the definition, how one becomes an Eved Ivri, the issur of selling an Eved Ivri, the issur of making him perform excruciating labor, right? Perech, the issur of making him perform avodas Eved. These are 2 different issurim. We're going to learn exactly when b'chlal do we have such laws of an Eved Ivri, and in what times of Jewish history do we not have the laws of Eved Ivri, and many more details. Perek Rishon has 10 halachas. Always the first chapters, especially the first chapter, is laying out the most foundational rules of this Eved Ivri, beginning with halacha aleph. Eved Ivri ha'amor b'Torah. Whenever the Torah makes a mention of an Eved Ivri, zaha Yisraelim shemachru oisei bezdin al karchi. It's referring to 2 scenarios: either to an Eved that was sold by a bezdin against his will, or someone sold themselves willingly. Case that, for example, when would bezdin sell someone? Ganav, if a person steals, speaking about geneva, right? Even though by geneva, really, there's a penalty of having to pay kefil. If someone pays back the principal and they cannot pay back the knas, for that bezdin will not sell them. But if they can't even pay back the principal, then bezdin will sell him. As we learned in Hilchos Geneva, guys, that's paid a gimel and va'ayin sham for many more pratim. But that's one type of evidence.
So are we belong to the bezdin?
We don't belong to the bezdin, but bezdin is responsible to make sure that justice happens. And since the only way we're going to get money is by selling him,
but how do they have the koch to sell?
Because bezdin has that power. And the Torah gave bezdin that power. Now, this is the only case that for a financial obligation, bezdin has the right to sell someone. Regarding that is that which we open up Parshas Mishpatim with, speaking about Kisikna Eved Ivri. It's regarding the Eved that it was sold by a bezdin. Do we have the psukim in Mishnah Torah in the portion of Re'eh, Ki yimachar lecha achicha ivri? And now that Rambam continues, and there is the second way one could become an Eved Ivri, and that is Moicher Atzmoi. Now, Moicher Atzmoi Keitzad, Ze Yisrael, As we'll emphasize, not every Jew has the right to sell himself. Even though it's me, I have the right over me. No, I don't. Only if a Yid, not as poor, as very poor. There, regarding that Eved, the Torah is making reference to in the portion of Bahar, the Chiyamuch, it means really poor. The Nimkar Loch. A person cannot sell himself in order to accumulate money, or to sell himself in order to have money to buy merchandise, or to buy kalim, or to pay back a debt. None of that is allowed. The only time the Torah gives one rishus to sell themselves, ella in tzarach la'achlan bilvad. You need to eat, mamish.
Is he selling himself to the betting?
No, he's selling himself to someone who's going to acquire him.
We're describing a society without a gemach.
We're describing a society that has such a mitzias, which is tragic in itself. It's not a positive description of a society. The ein adam rishoy limkeres atzmai ad shelo yishor lo klum, making it clear. If a person has what to wear, they cannot sell themselves. Prior to selling yourself, sell your clothing. It's only when you don't even have that to sell. Then halacha beis. Kfar biyanu she'eino ishin amkeres b'gneivaso v'chein eino moicheres etzatzma. So yes, the Torah in Parshas Mishpatim speaks about an Amma Ivriya, as we'll learn soon in these series. That's different. That's a father under certain conditions being allowed to sell his minor daughter, but neither of the two that we mentioned above, based in selling or selling yourself, is shayach by the female gender. Furthermore, a woman may never buy an Eved, not a Nivi and not a Kanani, and the reason for that is mipnei achshad. We don't want for people to suspect her that she's committing zunus with that Eved. The ein hager nikna be'Eved divri. Another important rule: a convert may not sell himself as an Eved divri, because it says in Parshas Bahar, Vishav el mishpachtoi, right? He doesn't have a mishpacha. And we just learned that the Parsha in Bahar is speaking about Moicher, that's it, Moicher Asatzmoi. That's the Pshat. And again, Nikna Beva David.
What would be the Ger outlet in case of poverty?
So, no, that's the whole word. So, if a Ger as poverty, that's not an option.
What would be his option?
In life, many times there's no option. Are you telling me that there's going to be a society that a person is going to die from hunger? God forbid. Theoretically, never, but Poyel Mamish, God forbid, anything can happen. You have the freedom of choice. Halacha Gimel. Now, guys, you're going to have to make a score. You're going to have to make a chart, because the Rambam himself will do it for us today in the third chapter. He's going to make a sequel between the nuanced differences between Eved that was sold by a Beis Din versus an Eved that sells himself. But let's try to do the best we could, not to always rely on the Rambam. Let's remember, it's like this. Beis Din ein moichen oisoi ella to a Yisrael or to a Ger Tzedek. Chein amoichen atzmoi ein edoshoilim kan atzmoi lugoy afilo leger toishav. I just want to point out how the Rambam is saying the same thing, but by the Machru Beis Din, he writes to whom you could. Michlal la batashamehen. By Moicheres Atzmai, he says the lav, right? To whom you cannot. And each one is implying the other. If a person violated that, then and that's the meaning in the pasuk in Bahar, that a person sold himself le'eker mishpachas again, right? He sold himself to that which must be uprooted. What are we talking about? It means someone sold himself to an avodah zarah. Le'eker zanim kal avodah zarah, which means even though you're not allowed to, but it will be an effective sale. Halacha dal. Bava amar locha. If a Jew comes and he says, "Listen, I'm in dire straits. I don't even have what to eat. You guys are not helping me. I'm selling myself to goyim." A Yid is not allowed to sell himself to goyim. You're not obligated to do anything for him until he actually does it. As we'll see in a moment, once a Jew is sold to a goy, we have a responsibility to redeem him, as we'll explain. But we don't say anticipate. Don't anticipate. If the guy says, "I need food," you have to give him food. This guy is not coming to ask for money. He's letting you know, I'm selling myself to Goyim. At this point, you're not obligated to do anything. Once he actually did it, even though this in itself means he violated a commandment in the Torah, just because a Jew violates commandments in the Torah doesn't mean, God forbid, that we're not obligated to help him. Mitzvah l'vdoisai. Mitzvah l'vdoisai. And especially, you have to help everyone, but especially over here, because if you are sold to the Goyim, you can assimilate amongst them. As it says there in Bahar, if post facto, regardless. Halacha. Such a servant may not be sold in public. Al Even Hamekach, on the auction block, which is the place where slaves were normally sold, nor in the valley or the alleyways. Besimta. Also locations where avodim are sold, and that's the meaning of the pasuk in Bahar. Lo yimachru mim keres avid. Also, it means many things, including this. Which the act itself is important for it to be done in a more private and in a more honorable way. Once he's already purchased by a fellow Jew, we're not allowed to make him perform avodas perach. Avodas perach means excruciating. Excruciating labor means what? Rambam defines. Number one, that's an avoida that has no limit. Doesn't matter if there's a long-term goal, but you have to know what you're working towards. Not something that is never ending. Or another definition of perach, avoida she'ein tzarich. When a person realizes that what they're doing is not necessary, doesn't matter how easy it is. That's called perach. In other words, why would one even make his servant work a avodah she'ein tzarich? Because the master thinks, I don't want my Eva to sit idle. For him not to be idle, I'm just going to make him do anything. For him not to be yoshev batel. That is also, you're not allowed to do that. An example of an avodah, guys, that has no limit. And the guy has to know what the limit is, which I want you to hold on to the vines until when I come. Till when I come, I don't know when you're coming. Ella, what could he say? I want you to hold on the vine in the vineyard until a certain time. Or hold from here until there. Until there can be a mile away. It doesn't matter. When a person works, they have to feel done, check. That's it. Can't tell him, Chafar Markham said, dig in this place, when he doesn't need for anything to be dug in this place. Or if he's asking him, warm me up, water, cool down a drink for me, when he doesn't need it. Don't do that. People feel that I'm doing something that's not necessary also. Guys, this means that every single challenge that we have in our lives, where we're doing something that is difficult, there's a tzorech for that. You have to understand that. There's a need for that. Not our need, God's need. Someone need, the Eibishter needs what we're doing. Now you have to understand like this, that the Torah was given to Yidden. Nevertheless, there were times, and there will be times, that the Goyim, especially in Eretz Yisrael, are going to be living under our government. And then we are obligated not to impose on the Goyim the Tayyag mitzvahs, but there are certain commandments beyond the Sheva mitzvahs, like over here. This is not the Sheva mitzvahs that we have to see to that they are following. And that is how they relate to us. So if a Jew was sold to a Goy, right? A Goy bought a Yid. Now we already learned a Jew should not have sold himself to a Goy. We know that. But if we see that the Goy, the owner, is making him work what we just defined as avodas perach, this is a sign of us having to redeem him. We have to stop the owner of doing that. And if we allowed it to happen, this is prior to redeeming the Jew. Because it says, means if we have that jurisdiction, we're witnessing it, don't allow it to happen.
can you measure what happens behind?
Says that Rambam doesn't mean that we have to go behind the scenes. What we are not obligated, we don't have to go and to make a bedika because it says but if we see it, and it's a good call to know whatever you see in the street has nothing to do with what the things are really has. Zero. There's no more sheker world in this world. So you see them in the street and you see how the master is so respectful to the Eved. You have no idea what's going on. Life. Halacha Zayin. Kol Eved Ivri. Asal Yisrael shekano laha'avidoi b'dvarim bezuyim. So we learn two lavim. Avodas perach and avodas Eved. What's avodas Eved? So that I'm going to give examples. There are certain labors that are called debasing tasks. That's something that an Eved may never be told to do. Debasing tasks that are only done by Avadim. For example, debasing is not changing a diaper. Debasing, it says, for example. The way of the world then was, Yaron, that if I'm going to the bathhouse and I want someone to take my change of clothing, I would only ask an Eved. That was something that Avadim did. Right? Or to have someone take off my shoes. That was something that you asked an Eved. A Jewish Eved may never be told to do that. What could you do with him? When you hire a day laborer, whatever it is the norm that you can do, there are certain norms. Whatever it is that you would not tell for a day laborer to do, you may not tell an Eved. However, okay, so what you cannot do, we just said, what could you do? You can have the servant cut your hair. You can have the servant launder your clothing. You can have the servant bake your dough. But even that is only between him and you. You can't make him into a manager of a public bathhouse. Or a public barber. Now comes the Iker line. But, however, so one second, when a person, let's think about the buyer. When someone is buying an Eved, what exactly is he buying him for? The ideal is that person, prior to him selling himself, had a certain profession. The ideal would be for him to continue to do that profession. Elamah, the profits go to you. So you're not debasing him. Now, if that's the case, when the Rambam says, don't make him become a balon, a public bathhouse attendant, if this is what this guy did, of course you can tell him to do it. You're giving him covet. You're telling him, you keep on doing what you're doing. I'm paying you X amount of money. And now the schar of your avodah will go to me.
Just to clarify, this is by Eved Ivri, yeah?
By Eved Ivri. All of the above. If this is what he did, yes, Yasa. But don't make him become don't teach him a new profession. Don't teach him something new. That is what you should ask him to do. The Eved Ivri, clear. The fact that he needed either to sell himself or the fact that he was sold, that is so depressing, that is so humiliating. So when you're dealing with a person that's already humiliated, we have to be extra sensitive not to further humiliate him. That's why we have to be careful what we can tell him. I look at the paradox. If a Jew didn't sell himself, you're getting a day laborer. You can hire a day laborer to do any of the above. It's called avodas Eved. So what? The guy agreed. This guy agreed to sell himself, but he's very sensitive. He's in a very sensitive state. In other words, the emotional, psychological place of a person has to be taken into account prior to us telling him what he should do. Beautiful. Halacha 8. But if people are not conducting themselves in an appropriate way, so here comes a din. We are allowed to, when we are able to impose our authority over them and to subjugate them. Remember this. Now we're going to, in other words, this is a different type of abdus with whole different types of rules. Another rule, if you have a melech that makes a decree, that if someone doesn't pay their yearly head tax, the king says, I want that money. So if Reuven doesn't pay, there was a rule, there was a common rule. Anyone who's going to pay what he owes for the government will have rights over this guy that was not paying the tax. So then, he can go beyond the ordinary measure. The ordinary measure is what we learned in Allah Dalad, to have him do what he normally did before, but not like an Eved. But so B'kitzur halacha ches is a huge halacha, but we're not going into more details now. It was the Rambam is saying that aside of Eved shenim kar b'beis and Eved shemacharas atzmai, there are two other scenarios where by the law of the Torah we allow for one person to subjugate the other. Whole different dinim. Sometimes this is already on the basin. If someone is not behaving keshura, if the ways of getting this guy to go on the right path is through gevura, then society can force him to do certain things, and that will be more than what you can do to an Eved.
So he's not midnight keshura before he's an Eved, or
no, not an Eved b'chlal. That's not a din of an Eved. It's based on sometimes can tell a guy like do 100 push-ups. What are you doing? You're forcing him to do something, and it could be more demeaning than what you can tell an Eved. We're not going into these dinim right now. Or dinah d'malchus adina, which is that if someone pays someone else's head tax, then you follow the laws of the government.
Oh, what doesn't it say? Try to collect charity for him before doing so.
That's what Yakir was saying. Of course, when we're speaking about, of course, we have to collect charity, not allow a person to sell himself. But such a thing is possible. What happens if no one has money?
We're not getting into the rationale to why we make this difference between it being forced to be sold by the government versus, a regular evident case, where suddenly you could have subject the guy to excruciating labor or whatever it is.
Correct. Well, Enonai Kishura makes sense. And by the way, never avoid this perach. Never avoid this perach. There's different layers. By someone that Enonai Kishura, it's called Yoiser Midai, and
these are different levels of work.
Yes,
Midai, avoid this perach.
But you're right. Someone is not Noy Kishura, then avoid this Eved. Not avoid this perach. Never avoid this perach.
So
you make him carry the stuff to the bad guys.
That's right.
Got it.
What are we saying in Halacha Ches? I'm sorry, just in one.
Halacha Ches, we're stepping out of the dinim of Eved.
Yeah.
There are two other scenarios where the Torah allows for one to be subjugated by another. What do you do in a society, Yakir? Think about it. We have a person that's a real troublemaker. You know what they do in America? They put him in jail. That's the way you solve it. Like it's one solution. Lock up. In a shtetl or in a big city where Beis Din is the authority. If they see someone that's doing things that are really not good, he's a mazik l'rabim. He's doing things. They tell him, if you are not going to amend your ways, you will be forced to become the bathhouse attendant for 100 days. And they can do it.
Okay.
That's what it means. Mutar l'shtamish boy ke'evet.
Okay.
That's it. Okay. Halacha not evet. Correct. It's a punishment. It's like what the teachers do to the Talmidim when we were growing up. They have the right to subjugate them. Right 100 times. Now they'll know. Now they taught them. Now the teacher feels good. They didn't know that. He wrote it 100 times. Who gave him the right to do it? That's called that he's imposing his authority on him. So there's certain, I'm not saying that that's okay. I'm just saying that sometimes Beis Din has the right to subjugate others if that's the solution.
They get involved in the army.
Yeah. In the army, if someone doesn't behave well, they subjugate them. Worse than an Eved. Halach anai. Kol Eved divrei yom divrei yom. Now listen to this. Chayev ha'adon lahashvais elov. The Yaron, if you have a servant, a Jewish servant, you have to treat him as your equal in the types of food that you eat. You can't, when I had the schus, the week that I got married, the night before I got married, there were riots and Fahrenheit, and the Rebbe spoke about to revive an old Jewish custom that not only by every wedding should there be a table, bachavadik, for all of the people that need to eat, but there should be something on that table more than on the other tables. Mamash. Not like everyone is getting the two options, steak and chicken, but then the table for the homeless, the Eden that are starving, they have a simple, it has to be an equal, that's not even by Evan. The Rebbe says it should be something added. So everyone should want to sit on that table. That's a chassid, that's an eved. But the din is that when you have an eved, they have to be the same food. Ubam omashke. And the type of garments, you understand? You're spending. When I grew up, how much did you spend? You spend $250. You can still get a suit over here. Already checked for shatness. Then you can spend I don't know, people have sugar, $4,000. You buying a $4,000 suit? Buy your ever a $4,000 suit. You're mechuyev. The type of housing in Brazil, every apartment has the shiksa quarters. You're not allowed to do that. If it's an eved ivri or an amavriya, the way you have a suite, they have a suite. That's the din. As it says, ki toiv lo imach. That's why the guy doesn't want to leave. He's saying it's good with you. You should be eating good bread, which is refined bread, which is just clear flour, white flour, and you're going to give this guy whole wheat,
Ezekiel bread,
Ezekiel bread, Schwarze Yorim bread. After shoyse yain yoshan, and he's drinking yain chadash. After yoshan gaba moichin, you're laying on cushions, and this guy has straw. Can't do that. Now, when it comes to certain living locations, yesh bozeh, masha ein bozeh. We had this halachas when you have a couple fighting where they should move to. There's many dinim. So, is it better to live in a city or is it better to live in a village? Depends. For certain, if you choose that living in a city, a krach, is better than living over there with those unsophisticated villagers, then you cannot be living in a city. And if you decided that living in the village life, it's a lifestyle, it's calmer, you're not running anywhere. If that's better for you, that's better for him. As it says that v'yatsa me'ima, mikan amru kol hakoyna eved ivri kekoyna adam la'atzmai. You think you're buying an eved, you're buying yourself a master. Well, in America, that's the rules when it comes to.
This is what I talk to on the door. In America.
A kid is adding that's the dinig, that's the minig in America with the dog. And that's not only external. You see, that's the thing. There's external. You're giving him the same room. You're giving him the same suit. You have to treat him with the achva, with brotherly love. As it says, b'nei Yisrael and dein Bruder ish ba'achim. So you, the master, you're mechuyev to treat him like an equal. But the eved, he must conduct himself as a servant while he's doing the tasks that he was mechuyev to do. And the final halacha in this chapter, halacha yud, ein amevriya meheges. I'm curious, right? That Rambam writes amevriya first. This chapter is about an evedivri, and halacha tests that Rambam writes evedivri and then amevriya. All of this has reasons. You just have to know the reasons. Only when yovel is in practice. And we already explained, right, in Hilchos Shmita v'Yovel, when Yovel is batel, and let me say the positive, only when the entirety of the Jewish people live in the Holy Land is Yovel Noyeg, and only then do we have the laws of Evedivri and Amadivri. Okay, Atkan, the first chapter. Moving on to today's second chapter. Now we're going to learn details about how do you acquire an Evedivri. When we learned Hilchas Mechira, we're learning Sefer Kinyan. Everything you're transferring. In other words, there's something that he has that's being transferred to the master. How does that transference take place? And you have to know in the other direction. How does this guy acquire his freedom? That's going to be the second chapter. The same Yaron is laughing. I don't know why Perek Sheni has 12 halachas. Halacha aleph.
Persons love to buy. It's something very important.
People like to buy. All right, halacha aleph. Eved ivri shemachru bezdin. Now, I'll tell you right away, I don't know, I'm learning Rabbi Steinsaltz's, Evan Yisrael's Rambam. I know that the Chayenu, there's different versions here, and they're very significant, these differences. I'm reading what I have over here. I think that you guys have a little bit of a different version, but it's consistent. So don't get tripped up. There are different gears here. Listen to the way I have it by me. Eved ivri shemachru bezdin. That's all that Rambam is speaking about on halacha aleph. Nikna, not moicher atzmai. If he's sold by the Beis Din, how do they make the kinyan? Nikna bekesef. There's one kinyan that's going to be valid, Yakir. Wake up. Money. In other words, the person acquiring him gives the money. Now, don't forget, Beis Din will take that money and pay what the guy owes from Genev. I know that. But it's done through kesef. Not shava kesef, kesef. However, when the other type of eved, there, Nikne bekesev ubishava kesev. That's option 1 and 2. And option number 3 is bishtar. Now, what would a shtar mean? Ketza bishtar. Who's writing to who? The Eved is writing to the master either Hareni Machur Loch, I am sold to you, or Harenu Kanui Loch, okay, I have been acquired by you. It's interesting. He's writing already what happened. I have been acquired by you. And then he gives them the document.
Interesting to know how to write.
Okay, or you hired a sefer to write. Halacha beis, machru beis then. Now, the guys, if he sold by beis, then the Rambam is following the Seder Avayim. Machru beis and meicheras atzmai. Then oivet shei shanim miyoim mechirasei. Guys, mehayoim. It's mamish 6 years. The year doesn't turn like in most areas of halacha, right? The Arba Rosh Hashanim, whether it is Echad B'Tishrei or Echad B'Nisan or the other dates. No. Today by us is Vav Adar Tavshin Pei Gimel. 6 years until Hey Adar. 6 years later, it's Mamish Miyoim Liyoim.
Sorry. Why is it 6 years and not the time?
That's what the Torah says. And you have to remember what we learned over there in Hilchos Geneva about what happens if the money of that sale won't cover the Geneva. The sale will always be for 6 years. And in the beginning of this 7th year, he becomes automatically free. We're going to see details. Such an Eved, Yakir doesn't need to have a Shtar Shichru. We're going to see all these details. No, it's Lachatchila, he was sold for 6 years. On the beginning of the 7th year, he's free. Furthermore, even when Paga Baishnasa Shemitah B'chlal Hasheish, Shemitah won't free him. Shemitah, the year Shemitah is a collective number. Everyone began counting right after the 14 years after we entered the Holy Land, and every 7th year is Shemitah. That's not over here. 6 years, when this guy was sold, miyoim liyoim, and on his 7th year, he's free, and not prior, even if Shemitah is during those 6 years. But, Avil and Paga B'Shnas Yovel, that's different. Afil and Nimkar Shana Achas, Lifnei HaYovel, Harezi Yetzel Echedus. As it says, Ubishnas HaYovel Hazois. Now, understand that we already established in the last chapter, guys, that Vayikra, Parshas Bahar, is speaking about what? Remember? It's speaking about Moicher Atzma. Nevertheless, the Rambam is quoting a pasuk from Bahar when we're speaking about Machruah Bezdin. Machruah Bezdin, the Rambam says, is B'shpatim Enei, because there is a pasuk that juxtaposes both together. And B'chlal, even though there'll be exceptions, generally the dinim that apply to one apply to the other, with the exceptions. This is a din. The Torah title was Megala in Parshas Bahar, but we are applying it to Machruah Bezdin. Halacha Gimel. Moicher Atzmai Yesh Ledim Karatzmai Liyasar Al Sheish. Doesn't have to be 6. It can be more than 6. Here also, even only after 1 year. Now, what's amazing is that the Rambam is quoting another pasuk. Because I take back maybe the B'shnas HaYovel Hazois, which is in the parsha of Moicher Atzma, is referring to Machruah Bezdin. There are 2 psukim. Okay, weiter. Allah Chadal. Echad Moicher Atzma, Oisha Machruah Bezdin. And this guy fled his master's domain, Ubarach. Just because you fled doesn't mean you're plotted. Chayv lahashlum shanov. You have to compensate. But nevertheless, in other words, even though you're not under the master's domain, that's wrong. You owe it to him. But if while you are away in Paga B'Yovel, we don't say, since you're not there anyways, you're not going to be free. Yeah, you're Meshubed, and it's going to free the Shibud. It's connected. Since you're still Meshubed, Yovel will be moved. Halacha 8. Cholam. What happens if a slave gets sick and he misses? How much do we tolerate? And when do we say, you missed so many years of work, you gotta compensate? So it depends. Whether it was consecutive years, listen, years, or or he became sick for short periods of time with intervals in between one and the other, which he's being sold for 6 years. Let's cheshbon at the end. That's what they do in all the Torah Shir Dalid. Everyone is a machine. They register when you come, when you leave. And at the end of the month, they send to the parents, how many minutes your son missed over there from this month? That's what they're doing over here. Crazy. Not right. If it's As long as what you missed is a drop less than 4 years, guys, 4 years, this is not less than half. It's not roiv. Four of the 6. It's unbelievable. In other words, the other lost. The guy was sick, couldn't work. The moment you were gone for a full 4 years, now and just to know the reason for that is because it says regarding a sacher, there's a pasuk in Yeshaya, even though normally Lamudim, we don't learn dinim from Nach, but it's an asmachta. There's a pasuk in Yeshaya that says, B'sholei shonim kishnei sacher. And since the Torah writes that he is like a sacher, since the Torah writes in Yeshaya that a sacher works for 3 years, so I want to tell you what 3 years. 3 years doesn't mean full 3 years. It means as long as if it's a drop less than 4 years, that means he worked for 2 full years and a little bit of the 3rd year. So he worked at least like a sacher. That's the pasuk, just to know the source for that. The moment he was sick for 4 years, you only have 2 years. You don't have even the miksa shana, like a shana. So he didn't work for 3 years. So he didn't do anything. Furthermore, in Paga Boy Yovel, nevertheless, he has to compensate. But if Yovel comes, Yates. That we calculate how many days that he was sick. And again, when we say that if he didn't have at least the halachic 3 years, 2 years and a drop, 2 years and a day, then he has to compensate. That's only b'chol yoikavet. He was severely sick, meaning he was unable to do anything. If he didn't have such a severe sickness, even though, what did we learn in the previous chapter? That the ideal is buy an evet for the evet to do what he did before. So let's say this guy was a barber. That was the job. So he's a barber. He became sick. He was unable to be a barber, but he was still able to do needlework. Epis he could have done. Then even if he was sick the whole 6 years, epis avoid he did. All of it counts. And there was a mitzvah to redeem him, but if he was not redeemed, very important. That's the rule. Different rules. The guy gets him for more time. There's no din of 6 years. A guy who buys an eved, by Jewish law, we are obligated. He was not allowed to sell himself to a guy. We are mechuyev to redeem him. Also, if we see him doing avoid the sperach, we have to stop. But other than that, when is he free halachically? Only by yoiv. As it says, "V'im lo yigol be'elam," then the yigol be'elam is as the Torah specifies how the karev should redeem himself, how the relative should redeem him, the community should redeem him. But if no one did it,
needlework is not considered perach.
Huh?
Needlework is not considered perach for a male.
For me, for sure, it's avoid the perach, yeah, but that's a subjective thing. Okay, halacha zayin. Anim kalogoy. Now let's go. If he cannot obtain the funds that he needs, right, to redeem himself, so then the obligation goes from him on his relatives. Now a person can have many relatives. So the rule is, that's a very good expression. Karev means that the one who is a closer relative has the first obligation. It goes from the closer to the farther. As it says, now an uncle, if you remember the words that we had, I think it was by marriage, Rishon B'Rishon, Rishon B'Sheni, right? Doi is Rishon B'Sheni. Ben doi Yesheni B'Sheni. The Torah mentions the closer and then the farther, because it's called Kol HaKorev, HaKorev Koidim. Really, it should be V'Goymer. Well, Beis Din Koifen Es Korev Liftoi, so now Beis Din gets involved, not for Beis Din to do it, but to force, so to say, the Korevim to do it. Why? Unique. Shelo Yitama. Yitama not with an aleph. Yituma with an aleph is tuma. We know that Yitama with an ayin means to become assimilated, to be sunken in, from the word teva. Interesting. Shelo Yitama b'goyim, not to him, not to assimilate. Now, loiperu korevim. I understand this yodam to go to he himself. Then it doesn't end there. Mitzvah b'yad kol adam b'Yisrael livdoisai. Now they're going to redeem him by money. The Rambam is really focusing, guys, not on the mitzvah of redeeming, but on how he becomes free. So we basically learn how does he become free, either through money, pidyon, or through yoiv. Now, another dip. If biyad goy, then you are allowed to borrow money to redeem yourself. You're going to say, of course, we'll see that when Beis Din sells you, when you're not working for a goy, we're going to see it doesn't work that way. Only for a goy. And another unique, you can be goy lachatzoin. Goy lachatzoin means, as we'll learn later, even if a person is an eved to another yid, to a Yisraeli, and there is a concept of pidyon, when I do pidyon, I have to pay all of the remaining years, and I go free. All the remaining years that Rambam is going to make, it's a cheshbon. In other words, if I was sold for $6 for 6 years, which means $1 a year, I worked 3 years, I only have to give $3, but that's not called lachatzoin. It's not called lachatzoin because if now there's only 3 years left, so now I am worth $3. I'm going to pay the whole $3. By a goy, let's say the goy bought you for 6 years. Let's just say, or until Yovel. Yovel is in 6 years, and the goy paid $6, which means what? That again, $1 a year. If this guy right now only has $1, he worked 3 years. There's 3. He can give him the $1, and he won't even go free now. But now he's already a year ahead. That's called goya lachatzoim. Make that clear. No one has to pay all the money. By a yid also, you don't pay all the money. You only pay what you owe from now forward. But when you belong to a yid, you have to pay all of it or nothing. By a goy, pay some, even though you're not going to go free. But you minimized, you reduced your sentence. First of all, there's no such a thing. Now, I want to tell you, I want to add something, a very important line. Kroivim are always allowed to redeem. It's very clear. Like you were saying, Yakir, Kevin, you were saying, what do you mean? A guy was sold by himself because he doesn't have what to eat? Like shame on the society and economic. Of course, people could redeem, but Rambam means to say they're not chayiv to redeem. That you have to add over here. When the evidence is for a goy, they're mechuyev to redeem. If he's working for a Yisraeli, then they're not mechuyev to redeem. We don't allow him because think about it. A guy selling himself as an eved. The other invested money. It's not fair for this guy to be able to borrow money to redeem himself. People are never going to buy him because then he can do it any moment. We don't allow that. And also, he cannot redeem himself partially, like we mentioned. Either redeem yourself, not all the money, but what is owed now or nothing. As we just gave an example, you were sold for 6 years. You already worked for 3 years, which means what you owe, the work that you owe to the other is $3 worth. So then give the $3, but all of it. If you don't have all of the $3, you can't tell your master, you know what? Now I have $1. Take $1. I don't owe you 3 years. I only owe you 2 years. You don't do that. Always what we just mentioned about this cheshbon, about deducting from the price of sale according to the time that you work, that deduction, dollars of saguzma of too little money. The Rambam, we have to follow the Rambam's mishal. The 60 dinar. 60 dinar means 10 dinar a year. And the guy already worked for 4 years. That means what Abdus is left, 20 dinars worth. Umatza yadai. Always, that's not called lachatzoin, guys, because you owe 20 dinars. Right? What did we learn, guys? Beis Din sells you only for 6 years. If you sell yourself to a yid, the Rambam says you can sell yourself for 10 years. So that's what happened. You sold yourself for 10 years, 40 dinar, which means what? 4 dinar a year. If you work for a yid, you have to give all the remaining money, but it's not all of the money, it's only all the remaining money. Or, as we learned, Shavakesed, the Yoitza. Even though there's no limit of 6 years, but there is a limit until Yovel. So there's also a way of making a calculation to deduct off the price, and we know you are only going to be an Eved until Yovel. Shenemar, as it says, this is clearly in Parshas Bahar regarding someone that was sold to a goy. The Chishad in Koineu Mishnasi Machrolai. When was he sold? When is going to be Yovel? How much money did the goy pay? That is the number per year, and deduct that. For example, Machar Atzmi ben Meyam sold himself to a goy for 100. Happens to be that he sold himself 10 years before Yovel. So then And that is deducted off the money that was paid initially. That is what he owes. But what's important, guys, that you give here, that Rambam doesn't write Shava Kesef. Here, you have to give Kesef. It's very interesting. Imagine, when you are making the cheshbon of Nigoreh Pidyonim from a Yid, the Rambam writes Kesef or Shava Kesef. These are all psukim. You can give Shava Kesef. If a person is being redeemed from a goy, you cannot give Shava Kesef. Geld. Because it says Kesef Mimkorei. The money of his purchase. The kesef v'nigal b'yalagoy ve'ein nigal b'shava kesef. Alocha nine. Kol lebedivri oyevriyo. Sheyatza b'giryon kasef that was redeemed because of this deduction of price. Now comes a very simple question, right? I sold myself, not God forbid. Reuven sold himself, like we mentioned. It comes out for dinner a year. But what happens if the eved becomes more valuable? What happens if the eved becomes less valuable? What do you do right now? That's a great question. And the Rambam is going to paskin. We always go lekula for the advantage of the eved. We will always do that. Simple rule. Not consistent, but the consistency is whatever is better for the eved. So either vehivri v'hoisifu damav. It could be when he was sold, he was a weakling. He had up samachle, and then he got healed. So he's worth more money now. So what are you going to say? He was worth 4 dinar a year. If he would have been sold right now, he would have gotten more per year. But he wants to buy himself back. Or the other way around. Nishchaf. He deteriorated, which is the way of the world. When they sold him, it was a starke yid. And then he went to, God forbid, he got weak. And now he's worth less money. So what do you do? Says the Rambam, whatever cheshbon works for the benefit of the eved, meaning making it easier for him to redeem himself or for his krovim to redeem him, that's what you do. For example, and now halfway through, he's worth 200. Right now, and now he's worth meya. Now there will be a consequence that's going to be unusual because of the shul. No, the rule sounds great, and it is great. It's always going to be to the betterment of the eved. But that also means, Yakir, that if he was sold for 200 and now he's worth 100, you make a new cheshbon now. You make a new cheshbon now. If you make a new cheshbon now let's go back there. Hoyil, like we says, the yesh legal atzmei lachatzoin, he can redeem himself partially, as we said above. So now, putting what we learned in halacha test, putting that together with the rule that by a goy you don't even have to pay all of the money. Listen to what's going to happen. Lachatzoin means that, again, like I mentioned, I have 3 years left. Let's say my simple $1 a year. If nimka legoy, I give the goy $1. I only owe him 2 years. But what's going to happen if in a year from now, I want to give another part payment and then there's a price fluctuation? That's going to be the case of it. Sometimes it's not going to be lakula, but sometimes it's going to be lahachim. Now, Keitzad lahakil, Kana oisei agoy, the goy paid 200.
What's the fluctuation? Fluctuations is depend on
the value of the eved. Either the slave market went up, or like the Rambam gave examples, the eved themselves got stronger or got weaker. So listen. Kana oise guys halt up. Kana oise Rebbe Mosai. The Rambam is giving now the example where the nishchaf, he deteriorated. Normal. He got up some new machla they discovered. Varehu ato only shava meya. Okay. Now nigal lachatzoin means let's make believe he's doing it right away. Right away he can be nigal lachatzoin. What is half of the meya? What is half of the meya? We said before that you go lakula, right, Rabbi Chaim? Because we don't say since the guy paid 200. So now pay half of that. No. If a day later the guy's worth half, he only has half of that, but he wants to free half of the time. Yeah. And now he deducted half of the time, but he still owes half of the time. Now let's say vehivri, and now he's weiter worth 200. Danny, how much is half of 200? 100. So he's going to give him 100, which means. How much did he give total? This could have happened theoretically on the same day. Let's just say that means that he was bought for 200. He paid back all of the money. How much did he end up giving some total? Only 150. Yachap? Because when they made the first cheshbon a day later, he was then nishchaf. They said he has cancer. Basically, was, and he paid half. Then they cured his cancer. So he's by to the whenever whenever you're paying for that part, you're making a judgment. The second one was l'chumra. The first one was l'kula. It's going to come out that you're only paying 150. But let's go in the opposite direction. Yeah. The guy paid 200. And let's say the day later, this guy can even be loiva. He borrowed money and he's getting, but he only for half. So what's half? He gave him half. What's half of 200? 100. He paid 100. Now the nishchaf arei. Now he's only worth 100. He owes half. And what's the chiddush, guys? Think about it. How much did he pay? He paid 150. He paid 150. Now, if he would not be able to redeem himself lachatzoyin, he became nishchaf. If he would have redeemed himself right now, he would only pay 100. He would not have to pay 150. But since you can be going to yourself lachatzoyin, at that time he was still worth 200, so he paid half.
He paid the first amount, locks in the percentage that was redeemed.
That's it. Very good. And that can come to a chum. Very good. Very good.
50% is free.
That's it.
It's 50%, and you.
And since that's done, again.
At that time, unless it's
very good.
Yeah. His worth evaluated. How often do they evaluate?
Whenever he has some money to redeem himself, that's shot that he can be goy lachatzoyin. Whenever the guy comes up with any amount of money, he can right away pay it down. The nimtza, it's like when you have a mortgage, The nimtza shenasa me'avachamishim, even though now he's only worth 100. And if he would have been an evadivri, he would not be able to be goy himself lachatzoyin. He would end up only paying 100. If he would get 100 at that point. And at that point, we say it's always lakula. The guy paid 200, he was sold for 200. Right now, my value went down. If you pay 200 for all of the years, the next day, if right now I'm worth half, I'll pay you only half. Like now, halacha yudal. It's a monetary transaction. The guy can be moichel money. So you have to understand something. When a person is sold by the Beis Din Yakir for 6 years, by the 7th year, he goes out free. He doesn't need to have a shtar shikru. He doesn't have to have a bill of release or a bill of emancipation. If the Rav is going to be moichel years, we don't say, okay, Mechila, you don't even need a kinyan. He's good to go. No. And the guy worked a year or two, it's 10 a year. And you know what? And therefore, which means, guys, this is important, that even though he's an Eved and even though there are so many restrictions on the master, what he cannot make the Eved do, it's not just a Kinyan Mammon. If the master would only own in the Eved Kinyan Mammon, why do you need to have a Shtar Shechra? But since there is a certain amount of Kinyan Haguf, so just because, now if the Torah says the whole thing is only for 6 years, after 6 years, the Torah removes the Kinyan Haguf and the Kinyan Mammon, you don't need anything. But if you are shortening it, you have to give a document. Final halacha yud beis, final halacha of this chapter, Odin Shemeis, big halachas. So if Yiniach ben Zachar, Harei ha'eved oived es haben at soif ha'sheish, the shibud carries out to the son. Right? Which we said mechiras atzmei can be, up until Yovel, can be 20 years. However, if the master did not leave a male son, even though the master left other Yersh, automatically the other died, Yetzel Lechebus. The Ein Oivet as Abbas, the Lo Yesa'ach, the Ein Tzarach Leimesh, Ein Oivet Shara Yersh. Nekuda. Another din. Even to the Ger Tzedek's son, guys, we're speaking about a son that was born to the Ger after his conversion. If not, it's not even a son. Even if he has a son that was conceived and born after the Ger, I feel ben All of this is learned from Sukkim. Now let's make a sikum. So the topic of this chapter is, how do you acquire an Eved and how does the Eved become free? So here we go. An Eved Divri Nikle bekesev oy b'shtar. The koines atzmai b'chamisha devarim. One of the chamisha devarim, either b'shanim, like we said, the 6 years, automatically. Oy b'yoivo. Number 3, begir yoin kesev, deduct and pay all of the remainder, or through a star shikhr when the adam was Michael. Oy b'misas adam b'loy ger. And by a goy and by a ger, even if they left the son. Now another rule, which is mitzvah loymar loy. There's a mitzvah for the master to tell the eved when he's going free. He should say the words, say, go out, b'shas yitziyasi, even though these words are not essential. The final halacha, that if during the times of the servitude he became ill and the rabbi spent a lot of money for his medical treatment, one might think he paid for him 60 dinner to the Beis Din. Turned out that this guy was so sick during that he was doing masa machat, doesn't owe any back money. The other edchat, are you kidding? Between what I fed him with the medical bills, I paid him a lot more. Because at the end, it's superfluous. You're going free. China means free of charge. Why would you even think there's a charge? Because sometimes it turned out that Rabbi made a bad deal. He spent more than what he got. China. Today's third chapter, Hilchas Avadim Perek Shlishi, is going to begin by telling us the rules of when an Eved may or may not have a wife, what will be the status of the children that he will have from the wife that the Adin was speaking about, a shifcha that the master gave his Eved Ivri. We're going to learn here about the din that if after 6 years by Hanimkar Lebeis Din, he says, Hafti es Adoni vesishti, the din of that you pierce is here the din of Ritzia. And when he does finally go free, we're going to already bring up the mitzvah of giving him a severance gift called a ha'anaka. This chapter has 15 halachas, beginning with halacha. It says that Rambam kol Eved Ivri. If this guy was married, we'll see, prior or post, he has a Jewish wife, not only through Kedushin, through Nesuyin, the other not only has to feed his Eved, he has to feed his wife. However, not if she's only an Arusa, nor a Shemeres Yavam, but providing one thing, that this wife is Muteres Lei. Muteres Lei means that you have Kedushin is Toifsim by Yisurei Lavin, Shaloi Kishitas Rabbi Akiva. So if a Kohen, let's say, married a Gerusha, and the Kohen becomes an Eved, the Adin does not have to give Mizoinus for his wife. Even more, if it's only an Isser Midrabanan called Shniyos, that's we learned Mamish in the first chapter of Hilchas Ishus. Because it says Ishtoi Imai, from there we learn Isha Haru'uyla Amad Imai. And if the Isser is Midrabanan, Hashem commands us to listen to the Chachamim. Another din, there's a big topic here in the Rambam. The Rambam doesn't write until what age? So many understand that the Rambam did that. Obviously, everything is on purpose. The Rambam means to say this chiyuv does not stop when they become bar bas mitzvah. As long as prior to him selling himself or being sold as an eved, he was supporting his children. Why is that? Because that's the way of the world. Many people today, they only become self-sufficient when they're in the 30s or 40s, and the parents help. Whenever this guy was helping his children, doesn't matter the age, the Adin has to continue. In other words, let me word it. The takeaway from today, right now, I can tell you, is that let's say Beis Din is selling someone, right? Or a guy is moichet asatzmer. Based on your obligations to the Eved, make sure that you pay very little money. In other words, you have to know the cheshbon. Like many times you can hire a worker today. If there's so many, what do you say, benefits? If there's so many benefits, you tell this guy, listen, I know the salary looks little, but because there's a lot of benefits. The Adin should understand this.
Make sure he's single.
No, we'll make sure he's single. We'll see that even if he gets married during the 6 years, which he could, with the permit of the master, he'll still be mechoyev. Correct. Understand who he's marrying. Some people are low maintenance. Make sure that he's not married to someone that they call high maintenance. Or pay less when you buy him. Now, ben machru beis the nemar im bal ishu hu b'yatze ishta imay. Again, we already began in today's first chapter. Psukim in Mishpatim refers to machru beis. Now the question is, v'chisal al datra that shekiven shenikna zeh nishtabda ishtoi. Like, why does the Torah even have to say his wife goes out with him? Like, was she Was she a servant? No, she was not. Ella that the other was chayv b'mezayna, that when he goes free, the other is released from his chiyuv to the wife. Right, we learned that's psukim in Bahar. It says v'yatzam imachu banav ima. Again, why banav? What the banim were avadim for them to go free? No, it means that the master was meshubah to the banim. It says v'yatzam banav ima. So we learn all one from the other. It means that during the times of Abdus, you are meshubah to the ishtai ubanav. Echad isha ubanim shoyla b'shas mechira. Here you go, Kevin. Or even a wife and children that he has after he was already sold. The Adin is chayiv, providing that the marriage was with the consent of the Adin. If he married Shaloi Midas Rabbi, what do they call that? A shotgun wedding? You know, he went eloped, then he's not chayiv b'mezainis because the guy says, I never agreed to this. Halacha bits. No. He only has obligations. He has no schusim. Ein loy b'masi dem klum. Wow. It's amazing. Doesn't take any of the profit of what they might do. Ella, who does it go to? It goes to the Eved. It goes to the Eved. We don't say Kol Mashakana Eved Kana Rabbi by Eved Divri. It's only by Eved Kanani. Ella Harei Maisa Yedeho Isho Mitziyas. It goes back to her husband. Her husband is the Eved Divri. V'chol Shazoy Chabal Be'ishtoi. The Eved, he still has rights to that. Even though he's an Eved. It doesn't all go to the Adin. The Adin only has the Chiyuv without any Schusim. Halacha give. Misha Mechru Beis then. Only in this case, yesh l'raboy litan l'shivcha kananis. The master has an option. Yesh means not that he has to. He's allowed to force the eved to have relations with that shivcha. Bein ha'adaim has the right to impose that. As we learned in the previous chapter, that by machru bezdin, if the master passes away and he leaves a ben, the eved is meshubah to the ben. So benoy shel adan ameis aviv has that right. If they choose to force him to have relations with a shivcha kananis, they compel him to engage in a marital relations. Why would they do that? Because if this shivcha kananis will conceive, the children will be more avadim kananim to the master. Only, but during all kolimei abdusai, it says however, all of this is only if he's makru based. But also b'shivcha kananis, like any other yid that is not allowed to have relations with a shivcha kananis. Halacha daled ain't never nivni mutar b'shivcha kananis. Add more restrictions that he already has a Jewish wife and children. I understand this. Maybe these are dinim and the Torah that we don't want this guy to assimilate. I think if a man. We don't understand these types of relationships. But if a man is already married with a wife and kids, even if he's going to have relations with the shivcha kananis, he won't assimilate with the goyim. If he doesn't have a isha ubanim, then God forbid, when you're giving him a shivcha kananis, he'll be attached to her. Even after you'll be free. Then Rambam says that's we have this from oral tradition. What I gave was my own boich sweaters, but that was a kabbalah. And I'll tell you something amazing. A kohen has even more restrictions with whom he may not have relations with. But if the Eved Ivri is a kohen during the times of Abdus, providing that he already has an issue, Banam Hadei a mutar b'shivcha kananis calling Abdus. Halachay. Im hoyla issue banim. Afal pisha masalei rabbi shivcha. Masalei shivcha doesn't mean that now you are only with the shivcha. No, and yochal afisha me ishto yobanav. You cannot remove him from his original wife and children. You can't give him two shivchas. Nor can the master designate one shivcha to two avadim. Like the master is allowed to do that if he's giving a shivcha to two avadim kananim, because it says yitan loy only exclusive loy isha. Now nirtza, the first time we're learning about the nirtza, we'll get to it soon. Nirtza is an evet who will have his ear pierced. And now listen to what's going on over here. And the master is urging him. Lotzeis. And that's what happens when you have relations with a person, you can become connected to them. So he doesn't want to leave. But you know what? This permission Yakir to be with the shivcha is only when he was an evet. When Yovel comes, he's automatically not an evet. So now when the rabbi is telling him to leave, the rabbi is imposing him to keep halacha. When you are forcing someone to keep a halacha, even though, of course, the Rebbe says, "B'darkei noim or b'darkei shalom," but if you are underdeveloped and that's the best you can do, and while you were forcing it, you wounded him, you will be patur. Because this is a bigger topic. If someone is striking his fellow to stop him from violating a din Torah, if he hurt him, he'll be patur. Because now he's asad b'shivcha. As we learned in the previous chapter, when the rabbi is moichel years, he needs to have a shtar shichur. When Yovel comes, he's free. He's not an eved. He's asad b'shivcha kanas. If the type of eved that sells himself never will have this din of nirtza, the din of the ritzui, right, of nirtza is only by parshas mishpat and parshas re'ei. Avol mecharu based in va'avad sheishon of aloynotzalot. Says then marez nirtza. And what happens after he has his ear pierced? Or only achi yamosa adoin halacha zayin afal pisheniach bein. That's important. And we learned that in the previous chapter that the abdus goes over to the son. No, not by the nirtza. And that's learned mipnei hashmua. Avad doi. Avad means to him, to the original master of loy. When it says lo'olam means far'ebik. What does forever mean? Sometimes it means forever and ever. By an evet knani, we're going to learn soon. Lo'olam bahem tavoidu. Lo'olam hem tavoidu by evet knani doesn't mean in Parshas Bahar. It doesn't mean until you have. It means lo'olam. For you, it goes over to the future. By an evet ivri nirtza lo'olam means lo'olam shel yovel. You know why? Because 50 years means far'ebik. There's different ways of it translating forever. Then say solame shahanirtza eino koina es atzmai. We're going back to the end of the previous chapter. The 5 ways a nirtza is only biyovel and a misas od. Halachiches. Evet ivri koyin. Another rule. Ain't a nirtza. Why not?
The nirtza is not getting any additional money at this point, right?
No. He's staying there partially because the benefits and because the guy gave him a shivcha kananas. He got attached to his new wife. It's many other details. Sometimes the eved becomes attached to his master. What do they call that? There's a syndrome. What do they call that? Stockholm syndrome. We'll see that in a moment over here. Eved koin, and an nirtza. Why? Because he becomes a balmum. A coin that has that the nirtza was done in the middle lobe of the ear. A coin who has that can no longer do the avodah. And since it says that at the end of everything, the shaval mishpachtai, which means not just by go back to your family, you go to the same status. If you're going to become a balmum, you're not going back to the same status. If this eved, a kohen stama eved Yisrael, if he had any type of position of authority in the Jewish community, guys, it doesn't only mean religious position of authority, which can mean any position in a shul. No. It means he had any position in the municipality. He was in charge. He will never go back to that position of shirada once he became an eved, even though he's free. Yeah, what are you saying?
So according to today's days, that they pierce their ear, that consider mum?
Sure. Not the bottom part, the middle.
Oh.
The middle lobe. And that's the minig now. They're piercing everything.
That's a mum.
Sure, it's a mum. Halachanai. How was the ear pierced? Here are the details. Guys, the Devarov is, open up a Chumash Mishpatim. Many people know this. It's in the beginning. He has to actually say verbatim. You know, the pasuk, Ahavti Yasadoini, etc. Lo Yetzei Chavshi. You know, he's saying the words that the Torah writes. Okay. Umagishoy, another detail, B'Soif Sheish, we'll see that in a moment. This is done mamish at the end of the 6 years. We'll see on the final day. Ideally, towards the end of the final day. El Hadeles, to a door or to the doorpost. Now, we'll see what that means, to the door or to the doorpost. But what's important is only while they are affixed. That means they are affixed on the building. You know what? They're going to pierce the ear, guys. We'll see, not on the doorpost. They're going to pierce it in the door. But he can be standing by the doorpost. Bein delis umezuzah shel adain, or whether it belongs to another person. The noikeves osnei hayamanis, right? But where begoiva shel oizen. Begoiva shel oizen means in the middle of the lobe. Begufa. Here you go. That's not in the skin where in my generation where people would put earrings. Not there. is where you guys put earrings. And the hayoim. B'martzeya shel mateches, it has to be a metal awl, and you have to have that touch the door, not the doorpost, the door. As it says, when the sat goes to Madelos. It says b'mezuzah. But you have both options. Yeah, you can be standing there. The Torah writes mezuzah to imply many people have doors, ornamental doors that are not affixed to the doorpost. It has to be a door that's affixed to the doorpost, which means you can be standing by the doorpost because it's right there. The doorpost. So why you write that? This means it's affixed. If you take the doorpost off the door, you're not going to call it the doorpost. It's pieces of wood. Avdelis is only valid if you don't even have a doorpost, but the door is affixed to the building, thus is good. Who does the piercing? The master himself. As it says, for certain mitzvahs, we say shliach shel adam k'maaseh. When it comes to a mitzvah that I have to do with myself, like I have to put on tefillin, I cannot be mamana a shliach to put it for me. That's a mitzvah on the other. It's amazing. It's called a mitzvah. Now, halacha yud. When it says, now there's many ways of teaching it. In the most simple external way, dibra Torah koloshen b'nei adam. So many times the Torah repeats a word, and when you have a double repetition, the teach is if the servant shall certainly say, because the word zve'im sometimes it means if. When the Torah repeats it, ve'im amar yoimar means no, he will say. That's the pshat, but we're going deeper than the pshat. It means that the statements that we mentioned, that hafti yasadoini, right? Lo yoytze cheshek has to be repeated twice. That's the meaning. In other words, not finished. In other words, he has to repeat the statements. Another din. What happens if right after the 6 years? Too late. When in the 6 years? Not a month prior to the end, not a year prior to the end. At the end of the 6th year, ideally, guys, when you're down to the last pruta, there has to still be a pruta's worth. Once it's not even a pruta, it's too late, but it has to be towards the end. Now, you're not going to wait until the last second because then it's going to be too late. Too late means if it's even less than a pruta, even though it's still within the 6 years, it's too late. So it's going to be when there's one pruta left or just a little bit more. Then it's after 6 years. So you have a very small window to do this. Listen to these details. And your master doesn't have a wife and children. Guys, you know this? Because it says the Eved Yakir is not only saying, I don't want to go free because I love my Shifcha Kananis. He's saying, because I love you. I love you and I love your family. That means the Odin has to have a family. He's saying, or on the other hand, if Rabbi Yishrei Banim, but he doesn't have Yishrei Banim, also ain't a Nirtzah. Because he also is saying, what happens if he loves his rabbi, but the rabbi doesn't love him? Ain't a Nirtzah. Because it says, in other words, it has to be good for both. Rabbi also ain't a Nirtzah. More, listen. Or they're both chayla, not nirtzah. Because again, it says toiv lo imach, which means acha yu shnei b'toivam. Halacha yud beis. Now comes a recap. This is a great recap. Ma bein moicher atzmai lemachru beis. Number one, guys, moicher atzmai ein a nirtzah ever. Machru beis the nirtzah. Number two, moicher atzmai also b'shemcha kananis. Machru beis the rabbi b'shemcha kananis. Number three, moicher atzmai. He's not allowed to do it, guys, but it is effective. Beis Din will never do it. Yisrael. As it says, everything the final difference, which is now we'll introduce the din of giving the severance gift. That's the way that Rambam introduces is at the end, he'll never get the severance gift. Machru based in, then manikin loy. So what is that? Halacha yud gimel mepnei shmol lamdu. Oh, before we go into that, mepnei shmol lamdu she'eno isha nirtzas. I know we didn't learn yet, but we're going to learn soon about the Amei Vriya. There's no option of that. Not only, you can even see it hinted. By Nirtz, it says, which means it's a man talking. The Torah writes at the end, says that no, that pasuk in the A is only regarding the severance gift. Lahanik. That means that the shek shem shemitzvah say lahanik have a Kachmanik Amevriya. Let's speak now about the severance gifts. If when they go out free empty-handed, the master violates the negative commandment. And however, if a person, this is a negative commandment, that it could be remedied by doing a mitzvah. You shall certainly give him a severance gift. Or if he's going out because it's yovel, or or with Simonim, we're going to learn that soon, guys, about the Simonim of the Amei Vriya, and she becomes an adult. However, if they are going out because of Gideon Kesef, like we explained in the first chapter, you prorated them, right, and you paid all of the rest. Because it says, and only then he left. So that excludes him from the din of Anak. This is a pasuk in the A. Give him a generous severance gift. And the Torah mentions 3 items. Soincha, right sheep, Gornecha, threshing floor, and Yikvecha, and vat, wine. Ke'inyan goyden, soin goyden v'yakev. These are 3. Devarim, sheyesh, bahen, bracha, matzah. These are items, guys, that naturally increase. And they generate blessings. Only from that you're chayiv to give him. What does not increase? Ksafim, begadim. Oh, it's living things. And a chayiv litim mehem. How much do you give? The minimum total should be not less than 30 selah. Where do we get this number of 30 selah? That if my ox, right, kills someone else's eved, I'm chayiv to give the adam 30 selah. Means the Torah gives them that value. And whether the minimum of 30 selahs, mimin echad of the above, mimin harbe, kashloishim shall knas or eved, right, a shor shanagach eved, and kills him. Shenemar, as it says, yitain la adoinov. Yitin Ladoinav is written by the knas of an eved. That's the remez that whenever the Yitin Ladoinav. Now, Bain, another thing, sometimes the master feels that when I own the eved, there was so much bracha in my house. He wants to give him a. So Bain Shenis Barach Habayis Begloli, the master says this was a bad deal. Bain Shaloinas Barach, Shenemar Hanik Loi, and the double expression, not Dibra Toy Kolosham and Yodam. Always give him a severance gift. Mikol Mocking. It says there, Asher Berachacha, yeah. If you feel that your house was blessed because of this eved, give him more than a minute. Final halacha tezvav. What happens if this eved ran away? And now he's free. Then in a chayv lahanikoi, because it says when you send them away. Another din. Eved, enek, eved ivri. The gift that is given to him has to remain under the dominion of the eved and not what? The ein bal choyvay goyva mimenu. However, the enek of the Amei Vriya, like her mitziyasa, belongs to the father. What happens? Then it goes to her. And the because the rights that Hashem granted a father is not transferred. If
he causes financial damage, does this add to his time?
No, it does not. We'll get to that.